What's up YouTubers, Johnny DIY here. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to build a wooden one-piece garage door. If you guys are new to my channel, do me a favor, click the subscribe and the notification bell so you can get all my new videos. Alright, let's get to it. So this is a tilt-up, up and over garage door. It's all made out of wood. As you can see, the wood is totally rotten. It's got sheet plywood on the outside and it's all wooden frame on the inside. And it's held up by these big metal brackets with these heavy-duty springs that helps you open and close it. So see, with it fully open, you have an overhang. So the first thing we're going to do is measure the old door. We're going to do the width and the height. You can also measure the complete opening, and then you're going to want to subtract about an inch, so you have a half-inch gap on either side, like this. A little bit of a gap on each side, so there's no problem with it swelling in the winter. You could always put a seal on the edge to seal up that gap. So I drew a little sketch right here. This is going to be the framing. I got my measurements. You don't want the height also to be really tight, because you don't want it to actually touch the floor, or it'll end up just rotting out this base plate. That's what happened. I went to open this thing and it just fell apart. So I tried to replace this bottom base plate, but everything that I was going into was also rotten. So we're going to rebuild the whole thing. Here's all the lumber for the framing. For the top and bottom, we're going to be using standard 2x4s. But then for the verticals, we're going to be using 2x3 lumber. That's just to cut down on the weight some. Now the framing is going to look like your typical wall framing of a house. It's pretty standard. We're going to do 2 feet on center for the verticals. Let's go ahead and cut all these up. I'll go ahead and mark this vertical, and I can use this to trace for the other ones. Now before we start screwing it all together, we want to sight every piece of wood, and we want to check the bow of the wood. We want to match all the bows together, so I'm putting all the bow out. You don't want to go bow in, bow out, or when we put the siding on the outside it'll be all wonky. So you just look down and sight which way the bow is going and line them all up the same. Now on each side where we attach the bracket, we're going to put the 2x3 sideways like this. Then we're going to butt up the next one, and that one we're going to run with it long ways. So the corners are going to look like this, flat and then upright. We'll use our speed square to make sure everything's squared up. Then we're going to pre-drill if you're using screws. Okay, now once you get all 4 corners screwed in, we're going to check it for squareness. If you're going to use nails, I suggest using ring shank nails. That'll keep them from backing out. But to do that, we just corner to corner, 139, and then the opposite corner, 139. If they're a little off, you can adjust the square before you start putting in the verticals. Alright, the framing's all done. Now I'm going to carefully flip it over, and we're going to start putting on that 1/4-inch plywood. We want to put on a couple of those sheets right away so the framing doesn't start to twist while the wood dries. Going to attach that 1/4-inch plywood with these washer head screws. If you're going to use nails, use ring shank siding nails. now all that's left is to cut a little skinny piece for the middle. I'll just use this circular saw guide I just built. If you guys are interested in making one of those, I'll put a link right here. I'll use that same guide to trim off the extra bit on the top. Open the old garage door. We gotta take this off. We want to open it because it relieves the tension off the springs. Then we need to disconnect the springs before we can take off the door. You can either disconnect them at the bottom or right here. I'm gonna unbolt them. Alright, now I'll disconnect the bracket from the actual frame. Now we'll put a few of these 1/4-inch scraps on the floor and we'll set it on that. Now we're going to pre-drill and attach the lags to the frame. Now we're going to want to attach those springs.
Well, this one's wrong with you.
Then we'll make sure those things are tight and good and tight, because that's the only thing holding up the door. I can carefully try closing it for the first time. Why we shimmed it up before, because we don't want this plywood resting on the ground or the bottom plate, or it's just going to soak up water and rot it out really quick. I decided to add some blocking to the back between the studs. This is going to give it a lot more lateral strength. Now before you paint it with your finish color, you're going to want to go ahead and put 2 good coats of primer on to seal it. Wait a good at least an hour in between each coat. Alright, now after those 2 coats of primer, you're going to want to apply 2 coats of a good quality exterior paint. And you're going to want to apply paint between 35 and 90 degrees. If you have to apply it on a really hot day, try and do it either early in the morning when it's in the shade, or late at night like I'm doing right now, right at dusk. You don't want to paint when it's really hot in the sun, or it'll dry too fast and it really won't adhere properly. Alright, now we're going to caulk any of the seams we have. We have 2 seams right here. We're going to fill them up with, I suggest using a good siliconized caulk that's paintable. Okay, now we're going to attach some of this metal drip edge flashing. This is going to go right at the bottom of the plywood of the door, and this is going to prevent water, condensation and rainwater from just sucking back into the end grain of this plywood. That's what will end up happening if you don't put that drip edge right there. So we'll go ahead and measure the door, and we're going to make it just a little bit shorter than the actual door. That's just so it doesn't get ripped off. And then to cut this stuff, it's just real thin. You just use regular old tin snips. Okay, now before we screw in this flashing all the way, I'm just going to leave it loose a little bit, and I'm going to run a nice bead right in between the door and the flashing of that sealant. That way when we tighten it all the way down, it'll sandwich it out and make a perfect seal. And lastly, we just got to staple up some of this garage door foam weather stripping seal. I'll make sure I put a link down in the description to this and the other tools and supplies I used today. Alright guys, and that is how to build a one-piece wooden garage door. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe and click the notification bell so you can get all my new videos. Thanks for watching Jonny DIY. Keep on doing it yourself, guys. Take care. Hello.